The prairie doesn't cry out. It murmurs. At dawn, the land stretched wide and bruised, with a kind of beauty only the broken know, brush-stroked in fog and wheat, stitched in silence. A chill still clung to the wooden bones of the town, whispering over the rooftops like breath through a dying man's teeth. Smoke curled from chimneys, slow and sleepy, as if the homes themselves exhaled from dreams too long clutched. Marilyn stood at the edge of her father's porch, one boot toe balanced on a crooked plank, the other planted firm. She was 18, or near enough, but already carved thin by hunger and heat and things a girl shouldn't carry. Her hair was tied back with a faded blue ribbon, limp from wear. Her hands, calloused and cracked, held nothing but a strip of cloth, once her mother's apron, now her only talisman. She wasn't pretty in the way girls in books were, but her face was shaped by strength. Chin like a cliff's edge, eyes dark, wide, and waiting. Her gaze stayed fixed on the east, where the sun smoldered up like a slow-burning fire. Another day. Another silence. Behind her, the house groaned as her father stirred. Benjamin Lark, once a horse trader with pride in his spine, now a hollow man who drank more than he prayed. Since Marilyn's mother passed from the coughing sickness 2 winters ago, the man had dwindled to smoke and spite. His hands, once known for their fairness in deals, had become hands that shook dice, raised bottles, and struck walls when words failed. The town of Ember Hollow knew, and did nothing. There were whispers, of course, of a girl too quiet for her own good, of a man who owed more than he owned. But no neighbor came knocking. No preacher asked questions. Silence kept its boots clean. The day crawled by in dust and dry wind. Marilyn swept the porch, fed the chickens, patched the torn hem of her only Sunday dress. She didn't ask about the visitors who came by after noon. 2 men on horseback, both lean and sunburnt, neither speaking to her. Her father waved her inside when they talked. She obeyed, out of habit, not trust. But she listened, and what she heard set her ribs to stone. She's young, strong. You'll get good work out of her. The man who replied laughed like a saw through bone. How much is the debt? $35. That all? Just give me enough to drink through winter. She knew, in that moment, the cost of her breath. $35. That was the price for her silence, her spine, her future. She curled her fingers tight around the apron cloth until the edge cut into her palm. That night, she was told to wear her mother's wedding dress. It smelled of cedar and years. The lace collar itched her throat like guilt. There was no church, no piano, just the outlaw Clay Goss, grinning with a single silver tooth, and a man named Whalen to witness, though his eyes were already blurred from drink. Clay stood tall but walked crooked, one leg dragging like it remembered bullets. His hat was fine leather. His heart, she suspected, was not. He looked her over like a rancher inspecting cattle. His eyes landed on her face, then drifted lower. She did not flinch. Not once. And that, perhaps, surprised him. "Say the words," her father muttered, eyes on his boots. Marilyn looked at the horizon. "I do." No tears. Just the sound of paper being signed and hearts being quieted. She rode behind Clay on his horse, clutching the saddle horn as he whistled. His land sat beyond the ridge, half dead, with a leaning barn and a shack that groaned like it wished to fall. Inside, there was one bed, one table, and a silence so thick she thought it might smother her in sleep. He told her where the kettle was, where the flour was kept, where the belt hung by the door. And then he slept, boots on. For 3 nights, it was that way. On the 4th, he didn't come home. She didn't ask where he went. Instead, she wandered. Not far, just past the post where the horses were tied, past the fence that bent like old knees, to the edge of a valley that drank moonlight like milk. She knelt there, not to pray, just to listen. The wind there sounded different, not sharp, not cruel, just empty, like her. That's where she met Widow Emmeline. The woman came by once a week, cart creaking with bread and old preserves, hands wrapped in thin gloves. Her face was soft but worn, with eyes that had seen and decided not to look away. "You're the outlaw's girl," she said the first time, without malice. "I'm no one's," Marilyn replied. Emmeline nodded, left a jar of jam, and said no more. Weeks passed. Clay drank. She cooked. The silence thickened. But one afternoon, Marilyn sat by the window, mending a tear in her dress, when Clay staggered in red-faced and roaring. He slapped the plate from her hand. Said someone laughed at him in town. Said a wife should make a man feel like a man. She didn't answer. His hand rose. It didn't fall. Something in her eyes stopped him. Not fear. Not defiance. Something else. Something deeper, colder. He muttered, stepped back, and left. She stood there, ribs heaving, eyes burning, but tears still locked behind some old dam. That night, she didn't sleep. She watched the stars. And when the sky began to pale, she rose, pulled on her boots, and walked barefoot to the river. It was miles off, winding through the cottonwoods. But she followed the trail as if her feet remembered a time before her body was sold. She sat on a boulder, watched minnows flit through shallows, and thought nothing. Until she heard the groan. Low. Human. She turned. There, half hidden in reeds and shadow, lay a man. Young, maybe. Dark-haired. Skin like clay darkened by storm. His chest rose and fell too slow. His leg was bloodied. His eyes barely opened. Marilyn should have run. Should have turned. But she didn't. Instead, she knelt beside him. Pressed a hand to his brow. It was fevered. He whispered something, words in a tongue she didn't know. Then silence. She tore the hem of her dress. Soaked it. Pressed it to the wound. She didn't know why. Only that she had to. The river carried her breath away. The sun rose. And somewhere, back at Clay's ranch, a man stirred and found his shack empty. Marilyn stood before the wounded man, eyes wide. And for the first time in too long, her heart did not feel like a cage. She didn't know who he was. But she knew this. He had not chosen her. And that alone was worth saving. The wind shifted. Birds scattered. And the dust settled. The river never rushed in these parts. It whispered. Wove its way through cottonwoods like an old lullaby with no words, only rhythm. That morning, the light filtered down through trembling green, soft and speckled, and Marilyn knelt again at the edge of the stream with a cloth soaked in cold water. The warrior hadn't stirred much since yesterday. His fever burned through the silence. His breath rattled but steady now. She had cleaned his wound best she could, deep gash across his thigh, raw and angry, likely from a fall or a fight. She didn't ask. He didn't answer. But his eyes opened that morning. Just for a moment. And she saw them. Brown like tilled earth, but clear and deep as if they'd seen the stars up close. He looked at her as one might look at thunderclouds, wary, watchful, but not afraid. That told her more than words would. She set the cloth on his brow again and whispered, though he didn't yet understand. "You're still alive. You're not alone." That afternoon, she walked back to the ranch. The sky was overcast, and the wind had a bite to it. She gathered herbs from the edge of Widow Emmeline's property, wild yarrow, maybe enough to keep fever at bay. She didn't speak to the widow. Didn't need to. When she passed by, Emmeline was hoeing rows of dying turnips. The old woman's eyes flicked toward her, sharp, knowing, but kind. A small loaf of bread sat wrapped on the fence post. Still warm. No words exchanged. Just truth in gesture. Marilyn left a braid of dried mint beside it. That night, Clay came home angry. His boots were muddy. His breath smelled of rot and whiskey. He threw a rabbit on the table and said nothing more. But his eyes narrowed when he noticed her fresh-washed hands, the dirt under her fingernails. He asked no questions. But suspicion, she knew, was a seed once planted that grew fast in men like him. She slept lightly, dreamed of cottonwood leaves drifting slow across water. The next morning, the warrior was gone. Her heart panicked, but then she spotted him, just 10 paces off, sitting with his back against a tree. Blood soaked the cloth on his thigh, but his eyes were clearer now. The fever had broken. He said a name, his name, she guessed. Tasani. She repeated it softly, letting the syllables settle in her mouth. He nodded once, then winced and leaned back. They didn't talk much after that. But each day she came. She brought food, bread, berries, salted meat, water, herbs, a comb even, to untangle his hair. And one evening, she brought an old blanket her mother had stitched long ago, one of the few things she had left from that gentler time. He hesitated to take it, so she draped it across his legs without asking. Tasani began carving. Bits of wood, shaped by his knife, slowly became something more. Tiny animals, feathers, a small horse with eyes too big. He worked with steady hands, even when his wound throbbed. It was his way of speaking. And she listened. She told him about her mother, about the wildflower soap she used to make, the way she sang when it rained, about the time Marilyn fell off a pony and broke her arm and how her mother wept harder than she did. And then, after long silences, she told him about Clay, about her father, about the wedding with no music, no mercy. Tasani didn't speak. Not right away. But once, when her hands trembled while pouring water, he reached forward, slow, careful, and steadied the cup between her palms. His fingers brushed hers. That was all. But it made her eyes sting. She had forgotten the feel of gentleness. The wind changed that evening. A scent carried on it, smoke, perhaps, or storm. She turned her head, alert. Tasani sat up straighter, eyes narrowing. Something had shifted. The next morning, she took the long way home. A boy watched her from the trees. Small, maybe 10 years old. Cheyenne. Hair in 2 braids. Eyes sharp as a hawk. He didn't move. Neither did she. Then, slowly, he stepped out. He said nothing, just looked at her, looked toward the place where Tasani rested, then back at her. His gaze wasn't cruel, just cautious, protective. She placed a handful of berries on a flat stone and stepped back. The boy stared, then gave the faintest nod. Trust, she knew, was not earned in days. But it had begun. At the ranch, Clay wasn't home. That scared her more than his presence. She found his coat still damp, mud on the floor. His rifle missing. He'd been to town. That much was clear. That night, she stayed by the fire, trying to stitch up a tear in her only shawl. Her fingers moved without thought. The wind howled outside. Wolves, maybe. Or just fear wearing fur. Then footsteps. She rose. Clay stumbled through the door, eyes too bright. "I know what you're doin'," he slurred. She froze. He stepped closer. "Think I don't see? You sneak off. You come back with that glow on your cheeks. You think I'm a fool." She backed against the wall, heart pounding. "I'm your husband," he hissed, "and you will act like it." But before his hand could rise, she whispered, "Don't." It was soft, but it cracked the air like thunder. Clay paused. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Harsh and joyless. "You think you got some warrior gonna save you? Some savage who can barely stand? He'll be dead before week's end." He spat near her boots and stormed into the night again, door swinging behind him. She didn't move for a long time. Only when the fire burned low did she breathe again. The next dawn, the air smelled of rain. She rushed to the river. Tasani was there, sitting up, carving again. She knelt beside him, told him what Clay had said. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what she now knew. Clay would find him. Tasani's gaze met hers. He placed the carving in her hand, a feather, small, detailed, wrapped at the base in horsehair. He touched her shoulder, then his chest, then pointed at the carving. Marilyn understood. It meant, "Keep this part of me with you." She pressed the carving to her lips, then tucked it into her bodice. "We need to leave," she said, though she wasn't sure he understood. "He'll come for you." Tasani shook his head. Then, for the first time, he spoke in full English. "I do not run." His voice was soft, deep, certain. She stared at him. Neither did she. That night, she didn't return home. Instead, she found a hollow between the trees, laid a blanket down, and sat beside him. It rained gently. They shared silence, shared warmth. And she felt, for the first time, that her story might still be hers. Somewhere near midnight, they heard hooves. 2, maybe 3 riders. Clay. He had come. Tasani rose, steady now, spear in hand though his legs still ached. Marilyn placed herself between him and the sound. Her heart beat like a war drum. But no men appeared. Only a voice. "Bring her out." Clay's voice, slurred but sharp. "I'll kill you, Redskin. You're nothing but a thief. A savage thief." Silence. Tasani didn't move. Nor did she. Then, unexpectedly, a different voice. Childlike. "You go now." The boy. From the trees, the Cheyenne child stood, bow in hand, flanked by 2 older braves. Silent shadows. Clay cursed, spat, backed away. The hooves turned. They were gone. Marilyn sank to the earth. Tasani stood, watching the woods. The boy approached her, held out a small string of beads. She accepted it with trembling hands. Then he vanished. Morning broke slow, with gold bleeding through the trees. Marilyn and Tasani sat by the river again. He took her hand, turned it palm up, carved something into the soft bark of a fallen branch. A ring, not of gold, but of pine. She didn't put it on. Not yet. She just held it, and whispered, "You saw me, before I even knew I was here." He looked at her and said her name, slow and reverent. Marilyn. And in that moment, she knew the world had not ended when her father signed her away. It had just begun to turn toward something new. The wind changed the way it moved through the cottonwoods after that night. It no longer passed like sorrow, but like a secret shared between 2 souls who had seen the same storm. The morning light arrived pale and clean, washing the sky in soft pewter while dew clung to the grass like 100 waiting teardrops. Marilyn rose with her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Tasani still slept near the fire pit they'd built from river stones. His breathing even, the faint scar across his brow no longer angry red but healing flesh. She watched the way his fingers curled against the earth as if it were something sacred, something that would not betray him. She envied that peace. But a piece of it had begun to grow in her too, slow and stubborn. The pine ring he'd carved for her now rested in the fold of her apron, bound in a twist of cloth. She hadn't worn it yet, not because she didn't want to, but because her heart had never been given freely before and she wanted the moment to mean something. She had been bartered like grain, branded like cattle. Her life, until now, had always belonged to someone else. This, whatever was unfolding between them, had to belong only to them or not at all. That day they didn't speak much. They shared dried meat, cleaned the wound on his leg again, walked slowly along the edge of the river where herds once came to drink. She pointed out the wild sage, the brittlebrush, the scatter of prairie hens. He showed her how to find rabbit tracks in the mud, how to notice the bend in branches from passing elk. His voice was quiet when he spoke, almost shy, but sure-footed, like someone who didn't waste words because he knew how valuable they were. She liked the way he walked, slow, grounded. She liked that he never reached for her, never assumed her hand or her time, but always made space for her beside him. He moved like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. Later, while he rested beneath a low branch, she walked alone to the edge of the bluff. The ranch sat in the far distance, a broken bone on the horizon. From here it looked harmless, small. But the memory of Clay Goss still sat heavy in her chest like a stone too thick to spit out. Her eyes narrowed. She could feel something stirring. A pressure, as if the past had begun sniffing its way toward her again. When she returned to camp, she found a small figure crouched by the fire. Cheyenne, the boy from the trees. He was weaving twine through a rabbit's foot. When he saw her, he didn't move, just tilted his head and blinked once. Tasani was nearby, watching them both, his body relaxed but alert. Cheyenne stood and approached Marilyn slowly. He held out the rabbit's foot charm with both hands. "For protection," he said. She knelt to meet his eye level and took the offering with gentle fingers. "Thank you." He didn't smile, just turned and vanished into the woods like smoke. That night, thunder rolled in the distance, low, rumbling. No rain came, but the sky stayed restless. Tasani sat across from her, firelight dancing across his cheekbones, casting gold into the hollows of his face. He held a twig between his fingers, stripping bark absently. His eyes found hers. He spoke carefully. "In my tongue, we say, Navihi vats vumuts, a home is where the soul is seen." She breathed in deeply. "I've never had a home," she said. "Not really." He nodded once. "You do now." The silence that followed was not heavy. It was full, like a room of candlelight. She reached into her apron, drew out the pine ring, and placed it gently on the dirt between them. "I want to wear it," she said, "but not while I'm still running." Tasani leaned forward, touched the edge of the ring, and then her hand. No grasping, no pressure, just contact, warm and calm. "You are not running. You are healing." She looked at their hands, then the forest. But the peace of the night didn't last. 2 days later, Widow Emmeline appeared on the edge of the woods, her cart pulled by a weary mule. She didn't call out, just waited until Marilyn came to meet her. The older woman's face was tense. Her eyes didn't wander. "He's asking around town," she said. "Clay. Drunk and louder than usual. Telling folks his wife's been stolen. That she's living with an Indian lover in the hills." Marilyn stiffened. "He's got 2 men riding with him now. Says he's gonna burn out every hollow between here and the river if he has to." Tasani had approached silently. He stood beside Marilyn, saying nothing, but Emmeline didn't flinch at his presence. "I'll help how I can," the widow said. But the man's fire-brained and spiteful. She reached into her cart and pulled out a small pouch. Dried corn, and a prayer stitched into the lining. She handed it to Marilyn and nodded once. "Don't wait too long to do what needs doing." Then she left. That evening, Marilyn and Tasani sat together beneath the tallest cottonwood, the one with roots like ribs jutting from the earth. She stared at the ring in her hand, turned it over, smoothed her thumb across the bark. Then she looked up. "I want to go back," she said. Tasani didn't speak right away. "I want to face him, not to fight, but to end it, to make it mine." He searched her face for signs of fear, found only resolve. He nodded. "Then I go with you." "No," she whispered. "You come after. If I fail." He didn't like it. She saw it in the set of his jaw. But he nodded again. The next morning, she took the long ride to the ranch alone. The horse was borrowed, Emmeline's, again. The prairie felt different now, as if every blade of grass had eyes. As if even the wind watched her with held breath. She arrived by dusk. The sun bled into the ground behind her. Clay was on the porch. His face was half shadow, half sneer. "Well, look what the filth dragged back." She didn't speak. "You ready to be a wife again, or just here to beg for mercy?" She dismounted, stood before him. "I'm here to say I'm not yours. Not now. Not ever." He laughed, loud and broken. "You think that mud of yours makes you strong? You're nothing but a used-up piece of—" She stepped closer. Her voice stayed even. "My name is Marilyn. My mother gave me that name. And you won't speak over it again." Something in her tone struck him. He blinked. She pulled the pine ring from her apron and held it up. "I was never yours. But I am his. And more than that, I am mine." Clay lunged forward. But before his hand reached her, A voice cracked through the dusk. "Touch her, and I will finish what your kind started." Tasani stood at the gate, his spear in hand, Cheyenne beside him, and behind them, silent, proud, 3 more Cheyenne men, not armed for war, but present like stone. Clay hesitated, looked at the faces, saw what he never expected, a tribe behind a girl he thought disposable. He cursed, spat, backed down the steps. "You're all fools," he muttered. "She ain't worth nothing." Then he walked off, just like that. He shrank as he went, and the sky above stayed quiet. No lightning, no rain, just stillness. Marilyn turned toward Tasani, her breath unshook, her spine unbowed. He approached. She held out the ring, and this time he placed it gently on her finger. A circle of pine, bound in ash and bark. Not gold, but stronger, more real, more hers. And beneath the cottonwoods, as the wind whispered songs that sounded like belonging, she rested her forehead against his. And the world exhaled. The prairie doesn't forget. It keeps its memory in wind-scoured stones, in hoofprints half-swallowed by grass, in the scent of smoke after storm. Even long after blood has dried and names have vanished, the land remembers who stood tall, and who crumbled. Marilyn now walked with her head lifted. Not high, not proud, but steady, as if the spine beneath her skin had learned how to hold its own weight. The pine ring stayed wrapped around her finger, worn smooth from every breath, every heartbeat. She didn't stroke it often, didn't need to. Its presence was steady as a heartbeat beneath her thumb. In the Cheyenne camp nestled beyond the bluffs, her days had become slower, warmer. She learned how to grind dried corn in shallow bowls, how to stir medicine over a fire, how to listen with her whole body. The women didn't ask questions, nor did they look at her with pity. They nodded when she spoke, laughed when she did. They offered space, not rescue. Children sometimes gathered around her when she sang old settler songs in a voice too quiet for a saloon but just right for evening light. Cheyenne often sat closest, arms crossed, watching with solemn approval, as if measuring the shape of her heart with every note. And Tasani, he didn't hover. He simply was. Present when she needed stillness. Nearby when the wind felt heavy. He had never once asked her to be his. Yet she already was. Not through claim, not through rescue, but through rhythm, like the way rivers belong to valleys without trying. Their evenings became quiet rituals, stringing dried herbs, walking by the water, sharing meals under stars that watched without judgment. Some nights, they didn't speak at all. They didn't need to. But peace, as always in this world, was a season. And like any season, it had an ending. It came in the form of hoofbeats. One afternoon, while Marilyn was spreading bundles of tobacco leaves to dry, she heard the call. Not a scream. Not a panic. Just the clear voice of a boy on the ridge. Short, sharp, and certain. Riders. From town. 4 of them. She rose slowly. Her heart didn't panic. It braced. Tasani appeared beside her within minutes, face unreadable. His body moved like water finding its shape. He reached for his bow, not rushed, not frantic. Marilyn touched his arm. "Let me try first." He looked at her, said nothing, but after a moment, he nodded. When the riders crested the hill, dust curled at their heels. One wore Clay's coat. The others, men from Ember Hollow, faces vaguely familiar. Drunk on pride or coin. Or worse, revenge not earned, but borrowed. They didn't slow as they neared the outer edge of the Cheyenne village. Didn't dismount. Just pulled reins and sat high, sneering. Clay wasn't there. But his venom was. The lead man, a wide-shouldered settler with a gut full of arrogance, spat in the dust. "We're here for the outlaw girl. You got a thief among you." Marilyn stepped forward alone. Her dress was plain, her feet dusty, but she moved like someone who had survived more than they'd seen. "My name is Marilyn Lark," she said, "and I don't belong to any of you." The man laughed. Cruel and quick. You were bought fair, girl. You left your husband. That's desertion. That's theft. The others muttered agreement. Tasani emerged then. Quiet. Unblinking. The leader flinched, only slightly, but enough. I won't let you take her, Tasani said. One of the other men raised a pistol. You think we're afraid of feathers and war paint? Before the man's hand could twitch again, Cheyenne appeared beside him. He held no weapon, just stood, back straight, eyes fierce. And behind him, more Cheyenne. Not armed for battle. Not postured for war. Just present. Like the land itself had chosen to rise. The air thickened. Not from fear, but from truth. The riders sensed it. The lead man gritted his teeth. He pointed at Marilyn. This ain't over. She ran. She'll pay. Then he turned. All four did. They rode off, leaving churned dust in their wake. Marilyn didn't flinch. Tasani came to her side and placed a hand on her back. Not to shield, not to claim, just to steady. She exhaled. But later that night, the truth returned like smoke. They would come again. Next time not for words. The next morning, the elders gathered. Marilyn was asked to speak. Not commanded, asked. She told them everything. Of the forced marriage. Of Clay's threats. Of the price on her dignity. The elders listened in stillness. Not judging. Not doubting. Just weighing. An old woman named Sote, with braids as gray as cloud, spoke after. You were not stolen. You came. You worked. You stayed. That is belonging. Another nodded. Let the town come. The earth knows the difference between a root and a weed. But Marilyn shook her head. I don't want blood, she said. I want peace. So they made a choice. A circle of stones was built at the edge of the bluff, neutral ground. Marilyn would go there alone. If Clay returned, she would speak. But if the men raised arms, Tasani would be waiting in the trees. The sky darkened early that day. Clouds gathered, low and heavy, like breath held too long. By late afternoon, Marilyn stood alone within the stone ring. The wind tugged at her shawl. Her fingers curled around the pine ring on her hand. She heard them before she saw them. 6 now. Clay among them. His face was thinner than before, jaw unshaven, rage glowing like coals in his sockets. He dismounted with too much speed, stumbled slightly, then righted. You've got gall, he growled. Standing out here like a queen. She didn't move. I'm not your wife, she said. You were bought. I was never yours. He drew a pistol. Not pointed yet, but close. I ain't gonna let you shame me. You and your redskin pet think you're safe in your little dirt village. I didn't run, she said softly. I walked away. His hand shook. And that was when Cheyenne stepped out. Just him. No weapon. Just presence. Clay's gun wavered. You're all so full of pride, he spat. Think the land owes you something. Then a voice cut through the wind. Tasani's. You do not understand land. You only stand on it. He stepped from the trees, bow in hand, calm as dusk. Clay turned, gun raised. Marilyn stepped between them. No. The pistol clicked. But it didn't fire. Because her father had arrived. Benjamin Lark. On a broken horse. Looking half dead. He dismounted like a ghost. His voice cracked. Clay, put the damn thing down. Clay turned, wild-eyed. You sold her, old man. Benjamin nodded. I did. And I was wrong. The silence was deafening. I came to make it right, he said. If I still can. Clay shouted. You coward. You spineless drunk. But his tirade didn't finish. Because Marilyn stepped forward, hands raised. You don't get to speak anymore, she said. Clay's breath hitched. You lost me the moment you tried to own me. And this land, This land doesn't belong to men like you. It belongs to the ones who heal it. And then, lightning cracked. Rain began to fall. Soft at first. Then harder. Clay's gun hand dropped. He looked around, confused, small. The riders with him turned. One by one, they left. He stood in the rain, abandoned, until even he turned and fled. Not chased. Not wounded. Just gone. Marilyn stood in the rain until her shawl clung like moss. Tasani came to her side. Wyan smiled. Barely. Benjamin stayed back, soaked and hollow. Marilyn turned to him. He knelt. "I don't ask for forgiveness," he said. "Just a chance to die with less shame." She looked at him for a long time. Then nodded. "Then start by helping build something that won't fall down." He looked up. Hope flickered. Weeks passed. Then seasons. The cabin they built sat on the edge of the cottonwoods, where the river bent just so. It was small, strong. Windows faced east. Benjamin helped raise the beams. He never asked for thanks. Never expected affection. But each time he brought her new lumber, she poured him warm tea. That was enough. Tasani carved new rings that winter, out of ironwood this time. Marilyn wore hers not like a prize, but like a seed, something to grow into. The wedding wasn't loud. It was smoke and soft songs. Bread shared. Fire danced. Children laughed. And when they kissed, it wasn't a declaration. It was a promise. That spring, the prairie bloomed heavier than it had in years. Marilyn planted sunflowers by the porch. And every morning, when the wind passed through their stems like fingers through hair, she closed her eyes and whispered, "What the sky keeps, the earth remembers." And the land, listening, bloomed back in reply.